Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Better Product Podcast Solution or Better Product Solutions podcast from Tapecon, and bringing in another great guest, Nick LaBelle from 3M. I'm going to say his official title here in a second, but he's the second 3Mer that we've had on the podcast because I think I'm looking episode 2. We had Brett Ludwig from 3M on wearable medical skin tapes. So now we're bringing in a different category, mostly on the tapes, but I'll let we're gonna deep dive that here in a second. So Nick's official title is Advanced Specialist Application Engineer from 3M. So Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Great, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me. And I think it's a great service to customers. What you're offering and sharing that information and how Tapecon and 3M can definitely help them solve their design challenges.
Well, bringing guests like you in is what makes me look good because I bring in smart people that know this stuff deep and wide. So you're one of them. So question number one, it's tell us about yourself and your role at 3M. So kind of the softball and just kind of introduce yourself and what you do at 3M.
Okay, great. Yeah, so by education, I'm a manufacturing engineer. So that kind of has helped me along my path at 3M. So I've been at 3M 21 years. The first 7 years, I was designing and modifying equipment to apply tapes and labels. So that began my career in the sticky products, if you will. And from there, the last 14 years, I've been working with our double-sided tapes and more specifically working with customers on their applications and helping them select the right products for their applications and really trying to bridge that gap between material science and how do I become more efficient at what I'm making? How can I create this design and just all the efficiencies that come with using a tape versus traditional manufacturing methods. So a lot of the things I do is just help educate people around tape just because there's so many misconceptions about tape and most of it's based on people's past experience with tape, whether that's their experience with Scotch tape or packaging tape or masking tape, right? Those are all tapes designed for specific purposes. The kind of tapes I'm working with are the ones that we call industrial tapes. And really what we're trying to do is the durable, more challenging application. So whether this is your cell phone, your car, your appliances, aircraft, those are the kind of applications that we typically work in. And a lot of people never see these types of applications. So that's part of what I do is help people think about how they can design differently and be more efficient at doing that.
And if I got my math right, you said a 7 and then a 14. So that's going on 21
21
years.
years. Yep.
So
Yep.
and
Absolutely.
I feel like I never meet every 3Mer I meet usually does some type of job rotation. It's never one place for the whole career. It's always rotating around in some capacity. So
Right.
that's great. And you must walk around the planet just seeing everything in terms of adhesive because you kind of see it everywhere. But anyways,
Yep.
first question, thin bonding
Sure.
tapes. So,
Yeah.
a lot of people, the word tape can be kind of go a thousand different directions, but I guess I want to start with thin bonding tapes. What is a
Sure.
thin bonding
Yeah.
tape? Where are they used? And I'm sure people listening to this podcast, I guess one goal would be that they'll never see the world the same way, right? They'll just start seeing it's like when you
Yeah.
when you have a baby on the way, you see pregnant people everywhere, because you're just going through that stuff.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So thin bonding tapes, primarily what we're talking about is double-sided pressure-sensitive adhesive films. It's a film of tape. And being double-sided, it means it's functional on two sides, right? We can combine two different substrates together. And when we say thin, we're talking anywhere from half a mil or 12 microns all the way up to 10, maybe 12 mils in thickness. So getting up to like 260 microns. So there's quite a range of thicknesses and different options, and they come in things called adhesive transfer tapes, which is a free film of adhesive. So it's all adhesive, so sticky basically on all sides, and typically delivered on a release liner. And then we have another format we call double coated tapes. And the difference between a transfer tape and a double coated tape is that there's a carrier material in between the adhesive layers. So this helps create some dimensional stability for parts and some body to the adhesive, allows easier processing and converting and automation. So a couple of different formats of products that we offer, but that's the basic definition. And I also talk a lot about pressure sensitive adhesive, and my personal spin on these tapes is problem solving adhesive, because that's a lot of what we're trying to do is solve design challenges. But the pressure sensitive adhesive means that's tacky, but you need to use a little bit of pressure to create your initial bond strength. And with time, the adhesive will actually cold flow and grab more bond area. So you're not relying upon a chemical reaction like you are with an epoxy or a cyanoacrylate or some other liquid type adhesive like that. This is a product that's already cured, and basically we're relying upon the mechanical flow of the adhesive to build the bond. So this is one of the most common adhesive formats. A lot of people are familiar with epoxies and cyanoacrylates or super glue, and the tape format people don't tend to see as much because it's hidden in the things they're using every day. So your cell phone, for instance, there's somewhere around 40 different die cuts of double-sided tape inside a typical cell phone. So in your pocket, you're usually carrying it with you. So there's one potential use. It's also your home. And when we think about your home, there's the building envelope. There's a lot of tape that actually goes into the building envelope portion of that. And then there's the HVAC system. There's a lot of tape that goes in there. And then the appliances and even things like DIY home improvement projects like tiles and things like that, or you can do a lot of peel and stick materials. Those are pressure sensitive adhesives that have found their way into those kind of applications. It could be the furniture, attaching laminates to tabletops, things like that. And then branching out even further from your home, you get into things like your car. And there's so many different applications inside your car. There's a lot of electronics in your car. A lot of those components are held together with pressure sensitive adhesives, whether it's flexible circuits that interconnect between the different sensors and boards and things that are going on there. There's the engine control modules. There's the attachment of the fabrics and the interior. There's the heating and cooling components for the seats so you're typically sitting on tape without even realizing. All right, so there's all these different applications, and then there's things about trying to make your car quieter, and tape is pretty instrumental in that too. And just a lot of people never realize it's there. So and as I mentioned before, it gets even more complicated too. It gets into things like aircraft, right? We're taping things to the outside of aircraft, and not just aircraft, but spacecraft and satellites and all these things that help make our modern day lives a little more enjoyable. So a lot of tape.
Yeah, a lot of tape in a lot of different areas.
Yep.
But I mean, but really kind of unpeeling the why, right? It's like there's so many problems to be solved out there, and so there's so many different uses, which you just said. But kind of when but at the end of the day, usually an engineering type function is going to specify or make the decision that this is the right product for the job, but they're generally solving a problem, right? So I mean, what is the landscape of really the real value, the value add type reasons that people have chosen to go to by the way, I'm gonna have to borrow that PSA, the problem solving adhesive versus pressure sensitive adhesive, but they're obviously choosing that as opposed to alternatives like mechanical fasteners, obviously mechanical fasteners. So of course lightweighting is huge, but I know there's a lot more than that. So I mean, what is the why behind all this stuff in terms of direct value to a product team that's looking at a bunch of problems to launch a product or improve a product?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So that is one of the biggest areas or advantages of pressure sensitive adhesive tapes or problem solving tapes, right? Is that you're trying to address these design challenges. And, so just think about mechanical fasteners, so what are the typical mechanical fasteners? You have screws and rivets and maybe welding and things like that. So now you think about their usage of those products, and it's typically, okay, you have to have materials that are thick enough to enable the use of those, right? You have threads you have to capture or be able to weld materials together. So, and then in addition to that, there's typically some cleanup that goes with some of those operations, right? So one, you typically have to cut a hole through your protective coatings on those materials, metals and things like that, might have paint coatings or anodized or things like that. So now, you're looking at, you're kind of potentially lessening the lifetime of your part or assembly because you put those holes in those materials. And then you start thinking about mechanical fasteners tend to be something that we would refer to as a stress concentrator. So when we start looking at how is something loaded or, when you're putting it together, you're focusing all that energy right where those mechanical fasteners are. So that's one of the advantages of tape is that we spread the entire loading out over the tape. The whole area becomes our fastener, right? So we're spreading that load out. And with tapes, they're also what we are property-wise, they're called viscoelastic. So they have both viscous and elastic properties. So, and that's one of the great things about the energy dissipation of tape is it has that both viscous and elastic property to help dissipate that loading and remain adhered to each other. So some of those different things can be like bonding dissimilar materials together. So we start talking about some of the design challenges that go with this. So if we talk about dissimilar materials, so we've got, we'll say, two different materials that we're trying to, whether this is plastic to foam, metal to plastic, plastic to metal, you've got all these different combinations you can do with a tape. And one of the things that helps it do is allow for movement between those parts. Okay, so each of those materials have their own CTE or coefficient of thermal expansion. So as they heat up, they expand. Now, if you have two different materials, they're doing it at a different rate. So there's that movement in the system. And where does that go? So in mechanical fasteners, we tend to see and you see this a lot in like trailers, somebody hauling a trailer behind the car. You see if they have rivets in there, you tend to see it start buckling, right? It has to take up that space. So as it expands, it's creating a gap between the two materials, right? Because it has to go somewhere that has to, that expansion because it's constrained by those mechanical fasteners. Where PSA, we're allowed or able to dissipate that energy over that whole surface. So it allows some movement, right? We have that visco and elastic. So the viscous part allows us that some of that movement. The elastic part allows us to cover or recover that movement. So you get really nice clean looking bond lines because of that instead of having all these different mechanical head fasteners in there, rivets, screws, things like that. So that's one aspect is being able to bond dissimilar materials together. And in some cases you have materials that aren't necessarily compatible with one another that can be bonded together. So if you think about two different types of metal, you typically don't want to do that because you get something called bimetallic corrosion or galvanic corrosion is what some people know it as well. And by putting a PSA tape in between them, you're preventing that ion exchange that's creating that corrosion between those two. So huge advantage for using a PSA over mechanical fastener in a lot of these aspects. So, we're making things last longer by preventing that drilling through our protective coatings. We're allowing that expansion and contraction in here between our substrates so they look nicer. Yeah, so there's a lot of aspects there, and there was another one I was thinking along those lines too. I'm trying to remember. Let's see, so yep, lightweighting. You mentioned earlier lightweighting. So thinner materials.
Yeah.
Yep. So the lightweighting aspect and why that's important is today's, we think about fuel economy, right? And whether that's, gasoline or electric, right? Economy or efficiency is really important. And by lightweighting, that means we can go further with the materials we have. So if we can go to lighter materials because we don't have to have that heft or thickness for a mechanical fastener, PSAs and thin bonding tapes are enabling that thinner, lightweight materials to help give you that efficiency for that. So that's another key advantage of
So huge
PSA.
for this emerging, EV market. And yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about this, what did I write down? Total cost of assembly choice. I feel like when
Right.
people choose an assembly choice, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to go with a rivet or a screw, but it's kind of like, well, what is the lifetime cost of that choice, right? Because I remember just recently hearing on planes the amount of cost associated with doing X-ray scanning of rivets on the bodies of plane as part of like structural health monitoring
Right.
of the infrastructure of that plane. And it's like when
Mhm.
you make that choice, you're also signing up for the life cycle of that design, all the maintenance that's going to come with it. So they're really
Right.
looking at the whole picture, right? The total cost of assembly choice is what came to mind. I get it.
Yeah.
But man,
Yeah,
it's amazing how
absolutely.
far that can go.
Yeah, and tape is an interesting option, right? Because it's not necessarily just a roll of tape, right? That's what most people see is that roll of tape, and well, how do I implement that in my process? And that's really one of the advantages of tape over other formats too, like mechanical fasteners, is now I can assemble my parts in two different locations. So I can make one bond at one location, ship an assembly to somebody else. The end user can, peel the liner off and peel and stick, and there you go. You've got your second bond. Or we start thinking about form factor, and this is really where Tapecon comes in, is creating that die cut that's the exact shape of tape I want, right? Whether it's donut gaskets or very complex medical device and things like that. I mean, there's so many different things that can be done with tape, and it also helps in the automation piece of this too. Those die cuts can easily be automated depending on what the process is. So there's so many different flexible options with tape. So that's another huge benefit.
Yeah. And so, for obviously the target of this podcast is really those OEM product teams, either in wherever they are in there, whether they're in the NPI stage right now of their product launch, or if they've got a mature product out there, maybe they're looking at a redesign. What types of resources are out there? I mean, so they want to learn more about this. They want some design guides or something to really check the box that they feel good about the design. What would you say to resources for the OEM partners out there looking for resource information?
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, so first off, Tapecon, you're an excellent 3M converter, right? 3M preferred converter. That's our highest level of converters. So you're a great resource for them for 3M materials. And here's a little secret about 3M and converters is converters have options or access to all of 3M, right? It's not just little pieces of tape here and there. 3M makes lots of materials besides tape and post-it notes, right? That's typically what we get known for, but we make a lot of materials that people aren't aware of that our converter network has access to. So that's one option. Supporting converter network for sure. We have our converter market specialist, and then we also have application engineers like myself. We're always happy to help with the customers and their applications and make sure we're looking at the right products, whether that's testing on their products or environmental aging, things like that. Those are things that I can help facilitate. We do have pretty large environmental facilities for weathering and testing at our campus here in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I'm located. And I mean, those are a couple of resources, but we also have a couple of different reps too that call on OEMs. We have our design solution specialists that call on some of the major OEMs that maybe are speccing in here and manufacturing elsewhere. We have our industrial customer specialists who are basically into the end user accounts and helping them with all aspects of 3M, not just tapes and adhesives, but safety and a lot of the different products that we make, so abrasives and things like that. So a lot of industrial oriented products and manufacturing. So in addition to that, we have a bunch of digital tools. So we have our website for sure, 3m.com, but I'll be honest, it's a big website. There's lots of places you can go. If you're specifically interested in thin bonding tapes, 3m.com/thin bond or thin bonding actually is the backslash navigation there. We also have 3m.com/double-sided tape. So, we're specifically talking about thin bonding tape, but we have other tapes too that are thicker that we call our VHB foam tapes. And those are quite amazing too, but probably subject for another podcast. So
Yeah.
we have all those things. we have some digital tools too. We have our YouTube channel. We have some apps for like 3m.com/thin or 3M thin bonding. If you search in the App Store, you'll find that. And there it'll help you select tapes by substrate. So, or if there's maybe something you want to find that has a UL rating with that, or something that might be used in a specific industry. So that app can be helpful with that. There's a selector on our 3m.com website also for products. And some of those selectors are agnostic of tape versus, liquid adhesive. It's just like there's options depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So,
Yep.
but the good news is we've got lots of opportunities and tools and resources to help people. We also have the chat button on the website as well. So if you want to get in touch with an expert, they'll be able to have an online chat with you and get you connected with the appropriate resource if they can't answer that question. So, whether that's myself or, getting you connected with Tapecon, or, that's the thing that we can help with. There's a lot of different tools that we can offer to help with that. And then even in addition, that's just kind of the basic level. But as we start getting into the more advanced level too, and we start maybe talking to an application engineer like myself, is we've got things like FEA modeling tools, so finite element analysis and things like that. We have data cards for some of our materials. So lots of tools. We just need to know what you need, right? Let us help you by just helping us out by what you want to know about. How can we help you be more efficient? So.
Yeah, no, for sure. And even if we get, if we get an engineering drawing that comes in and 3M specified, obviously we're on the horn with you guys, but there's also been good collaboration where sometimes we'll bring our customer right on the line with, you or another application specialist, and kind of not just solve the solution of to really bake the cake, we need process plus materials to get the winning solution, right? So when we get all of our heads together, it's kind of it's a win-win for everybody, and we can pretty much accelerate, into the right bill of material and router to get some prototypes out faster than trying to kind of call individual places separately. So, but I appreciate all that. I'll give a last question. Any sneak peek on anything new? Anything that you're working on that's kind of exciting down the road that you're able to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, recently launched product called SP7202 or 7202, and the SP means screen printable. So what we've primarily talked about so far today has been pressure sensitive adhesive tapes, right? So they come as a roll, and they're typically either used that way or converted into a shape by Tapecon and used by a customer. So that's a traditional way of doing it. So tends to be more of subtractive manufacturing, whereas with the new SP7202, we're able to get into additive manufacturing by screen printing the adhesive only where we want to. And some of the benefits around this are less waste, so sustainability. So if you have sustainability metrics you're trying to meet, it's a good option for that. So there's the reduced waste. It also uses a solventless manufacturing process, so it's 100% solid. So it's a real nice benefit there as well. And the other thing is, there's been a few screen printable adhesives in the marketplace before. We have a couple other ones in our portfolio, but one of the things that's always kind of been a challenge for them is to try and get to the level of performance of a typical tape. And that's really the exciting part, is now we are really at that level of a high performance tape. So now we can print something very similar to our 200 MP adhesive. And what that adhesive is typically used for high surface energy substrates, so metals and polycarbonates, things like that are very common substrates. And it is a high shear strength adhesive. So it means that it typically holds a lot of weight and shear. So under a lot of loading, it does quite well. So it could end up in things like membrane switches, flex circuit attachment, graphic overlays, a lot of things like that is typically where you might find an application like this. And again, it's new, it's exciting, it's something I personally have worked on for some time, and I'm really excited about it. I mean, it's really, as we get into, 3M has this tagline of remaking the world of making things. This really fits into that, right? We've had tapes for a while, right? We've been remaking the world of making things with tape for some time, right? Mechanical fasteners been around for a very long time. Tapes and adhesives, yeah, they've been around, but we're gaining more and more traction, with converting those opportunities over. But now we're taking it into even just more of the additive manufacturing space with an adhesive. And it's really exciting because with that, you can also do some very fine detail things. So things that were difficult, if not impossible, to subtractively convert, even with things like using lasers, to typically get that really fine detail. Now you can just screen print that, and it's a UV cure system. It really is very interesting and amazing, all the different possibilities it could open up.
Great. I'm actually excited to have our engineering team listen to that whole description, because that was really good. So thanks. And that's exciting stuff, and I appreciate that. So thanks, Nick. I mean, we're at time, man. I'm going to cap it. I mean, I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, obviously the skill and expertise is awesome. So I really appreciate all the share and everything. Is there any final parting words or anything that you want to add to kind of wrap it up?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Steve, so much for having me. That's again, 3M is such a large company, and we have so many different solutions. It can be really challenging to navigate. So please get connected with Tapecon, get connected with your 3M local specialist. We'll help navigate 3M, right? We'll help be that easy button for you to navigate 3M, because we're complex. But like I said, we have those solutions, and sometimes people just don't know what's out there until they start asking the questions. Like, I'm trying to do this. Do you have something that can help me do that? So we're always happy to help, and just need to know how we can help take you to where you want to be.
All right. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
The Better Products Podcast is about educating product teams about new materials and new technologies, all in the custom material converting and printed electronic space, to help them design and build better products. So in this podcast, I'm hoping to give wide-ranging conversations with various people throughout the industry and just bring a lot of good content to the table. So if you're interested in learning more about the industry, materials, processes, how to improve products if you're on a product team, or just general know-how of what the heck is going on in this industry, then subscribe to the podcast and get ready for some more really good episodes as I bring in some great guests. Thanks.